I'm Jessica, turning 32 years old. I've been married to my husband Ronald for 4 years now, and we're currently living with my in-laws. They run a restaurant, and while Ronald works outside, I quit my job to help my in-laws with their business on a daily basis. In fact, it feels like I'm the one running the show most of the time. I'm involved in everything from securing ingredients in the early morning to doing the prep work and serving customers. Working late into the night, my fatigue started to accumulate. But my in-laws never let me rest, and I'm out working almost every day. The regular customers even started to worry about me. One day, my younger brother James announced that he was getting married to his longtime girlfriend Sarah. Although they're still young, they're both mature, and my parents have accepted them. It felt like they were already part of the family, so I was thrilled as if it were my own wedding. The invitation to the wedding is still to come, but they asked me to attend, and of course I told them I would. But there's a problem. It's whether my in-laws will allow it. Since I'm technically an employee, I thought I might have some paid time off, so I decided to negotiate for 3 days off. Excuse me, can I talk to you for a moment? After closing the restaurant and finishing the final check, I approached my relaxed in-laws at home. Ronald, who had just returned from work, was there too. "What's up?" The three of them looked at me as if I was an intruder, and Ronald asked with a big sigh. This atmosphere is suffocating for me. I have my brother's wedding in 2 months. I'd like to take about 3 days off for it. Huh? You think you're in a position to take time off? My mother-in-law glared at me with a devilish look as soon as she heard that I wanted to take a break. Despite feeling intimidated, I mustered up the courage to nod. I should have some paid time off left, right? I've never used it. I'd like to use it. So you want to take time off and still get paid? But if I don't, you wouldn't let me take my regular days off if I took time off this month, right? How cheeky.
Let her take time off. It's not a big deal.
The already tense atmosphere seemed to get worse, but then Ronald, my husband, tried to calm my mother-in-law down. I was surprised that my husband took my side, and I looked at him with wide eyes. Then he was grinning at my mother-in-law. Perhaps sensing his mood, my mother-in-law also gave a wry smile, and then she easily agreed. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I was happy to get the time off and felt like jumping for joy on the spot. On the day before the wedding, I prepared to stay at my parents' house for 3 days and left early in the morning. My in-laws and husband were still asleep, so I just left a note saying I was leaving. Then I drove to my parents' house. It's not too far from my in-laws' house to my parents' house. It's about an hour's drive. I was excited to see my parents, whom I hadn't seen in about 4 years. I'm home! Having left my in-laws' house early in the morning, I arrived at my parents' home earlier than planned. Even though I knew my parents would be awake, I tried to enter the house as quietly as possible. As soon as I stepped inside, the faint smell of breakfast tickled my nose. Oh, you're early! My mother popped her head out from the living room, spotted me, and immediately rushed over. Yeah, I left there early. I left my suitcase by the entrance, took off my shoes, and stepped further into the house. My mother, clearly delighted, took my hand and led me to the living room. Seeing her face filled me with a warm feeling of truly being home. Upon entering the living room, I found my father already awake, and my younger brother James, sitting at the dining table. As soon as they confirmed my return, both of their faces lit up with joy. After all, it had been 4 years. I was overjoyed to see my family again. After that, the 4 of us gathered around the table and had a long chat. James talked about his girlfriend, what kind of wedding they were planning. Seeing James' love-struck expression while he talked about her made me feel warm inside. I was asked about my in-laws' house, but I felt that it wasn't a happy topic to discuss at such a joyful time, so I deliberately chose not to share anything with my family. The following day, the wedding ceremony took place. James's bride was stunningly beautiful, and the ceremony was so lovely that I was almost moved to tears. After successfully going through the whole day of the wedding ceremony and reception, we returned home. Despite the fun we had, we were quite tired and soon fell asleep. The next day, even though I was supposed to return to my in-laws' house, the joy of meeting my family after such a long time, and the desire to spend more time with my new sister-in-law, made me wish to stay one more day. I knew my in-laws and my husband Ronald wouldn't be okay with this. But it was a time of celebration, and I thought they might let it slide just for one more day. So with the thought of enjoying more family time, I decided to take a chance and call my mother-in-law. To be honest, I was scared. I didn't know what she would say or if she would even agree. I distanced myself from my family to make the call, and for a moment, I just stared at the phone, but eventually I dialed her number. After a few rings, I heard my mother-in-law's voice. Hello? When are you planning on coming back? You better come back soon. The first thing I heard was a clearly irritated voice. Could I stay at my parents' house for just one more day? Despite feeling uncomfortable with my mother-in-law's words, I timidly asked her. My mother-in-law sighed heavily after hearing my words and went silent for a while. That silence felt unbearably long to me. Just as I was thinking that it was impossible and I should start preparing to return, I heard a snicker from my mother-in-law over the phone. You really only think about yourself, don't you? You don't have to come back ever again. What? I was speechless at her unexpected words. Then my mother-in-law, still laughing, said, Why don't you just divorce Ronald? We don't need a useless daughter-in-law like you. And it seems like Ronald doesn't need you anymore either. What does that mean? I asked my mother-in-law, unable to understand what she was saying. Laughing, she told me to figure it out myself and hung up the phone. I wondered if she really meant what she said, and as I looked at my disconnected phone, I decided to contact my husband, Ronald.
Hello, what's up?
Judging from Ronald's voice, it seemed nothing unusual had happened. I'm sorry for interrupting your work. I just called your mom and asked if I could stay at my parents' house for one more day.
What did my mom say?
She said I don't have to come back, and she also said we should get a divorce. She said you don't need me anymore. I told Ronald honestly what his mother had said when he asked me. I couldn't believe he would think such a thing. I thought his mother must have said those words lightly out of irritation because I wasn't coming back. However, Ronald fell silent for a while after I spoke and then sighed heavily.
Well, I didn't want to have to say this, but I want to break up with you, Jessica.
What? His unexpected words left me in shock, as if time had stopped. We've been married for 4 years, and it's not like I hadn't felt that our love was gone. But I had put up with Ronald's parents to preserve our life together. Why? I asked, trying to hide my agitation, to know why he felt that way. My hand was trembling, and my heart was pounding. Depending on his reasons, it might be possible to fix things. If there was something wrong with me, I could change. Even if the love was gone, I still wanted to be with Ronald. I prayed from the bottom of my heart that Ronald's words would be something we could fix.
The thing is, there's someone else I like.
Oh, it's over. Anyone would know that hearing the word someone else from Ronald meant our relationship couldn't continue.
Well, that's it then.
Ronald hung up before I could respond. I stood still, unable to do anything, not even cry. What's wrong? After what seemed like a long time, my mother came over with a worried look on her face. When I looked at her, I saw my father peering in from a little behind her. No, it's nothing. The divorce wasn't final, and I didn't think it was appropriate to discuss it on such a happy day, so I tried to put on a smile so my parents wouldn't suspect anything. My mother seemed to sense something was off, but she didn't say anything more. After that, I spent a fun time not thinking about what my mother-in-law or Ronald had said, partly because my brother and his wife had come over. Rather, it felt like I was forcefully putting on a happy facade. My parents, my brother, and his wife all went out, laughed a lot, and talked a lot. I might have been desperately clinging to everyone, not wanting to be alone. My brother and his wife seemed to suspect something was up. Jessica, are you going back tomorrow? We all went to a cafe, and while our parents were ordering, my brother and his wife and I sat at a table. Well, I honestly didn't know if I could go back. That's why I couldn't answer right away. Are you okay? You seem to be faking your cheerfulness today. Yeah, it's odd, isn't it? I knew my younger brother and his wife occasionally gave me worried glances. That's why I can't deny it. Is something wrong? My younger brother has always been kind. Whenever I'm feeling down or anxious, he's quick to notice and offer words of comfort. To outsiders, it might seem like he's a big fan of his older sister. Nothing's wrong, I reply, forcing a smile. But James and his wife keep staring at me. I feel uncomfortable under their gaze, as if they could see right through me. What's with the staring contest? At that moment, our parents return to the table with drinks. Perhaps they find our behavior amusing, as they both wear gentle smiles. Taking this as a cue, James and his wife break their gaze from me, assuring our mother that everything's fine, and the conversation picks up again on a different topic. But the lively atmosphere quickly fades. Suddenly, the ringing of my cell phone emanates from my purse. I pull out my phone, and there on the screen is the name of my mother-in-law. When I don't answer right away, everyone falls silent and turns their attention to me. It's from my mother-in-law. I'll step outside for a bit. Why not talk here? Why do you need to go outside? As I attempted to rise from my seat, my mother took hold of my hand, restraining me from standing up. Her face did not reflect the gentle mother I knew, but displayed a stern expression instead. All right. Hello? As soon as I answer the phone, my mother-in-law's laughter rings out. So, Ronald is divorcing you. That's hilarious. Let's talk about this when I get back home tomorrow. Due to our close proximity, my mother-in-law's voice can be heard by my parents. I try to tell her that now is not the time to discuss this, but she doesn't seem to want to stop talking. Good riddance. You've been living your married life blissfully unaware that Ronald was cheating on you. You were never good enough for our family from the start. Oh, I feel so relieved now that you're gone. Ronald said he'll send the divorce papers. So don't bother coming back. We'll send your things later. With that, she hangs up. Cheating? I froze on the spot, phone in hand. I was shocked when I heard he had someone else, but to learn that he was cheating on me? It's devastating. What was the point of all the time I spent trying to please my in-laws and my husband? As I ponder this, I can't stop the tears from flowing. Jessica. My parents and James's couple probably heard everything. My mother-in-law's voice is too loud, so even at the lowest volume, anyone close by can hear her. I can't make any excuses or show a smile, so I just look down.
What just happened?
My father's quiet, low voice echoes. As I try to hold back my flowing tears, my mother hands me a handkerchief. I accept it and press it to my eyes, the faint scent of my mother's perfume reaching my nose, further stirring my emotions and causing my tears to flow even more.
I thought I heard something about cheating.
I can tell the atmosphere has instantly frozen over. I don't dare look at their faces, but I can imagine their expressions of shock. The day after my younger brother and his wife got married, his older sister announced her divorce. I'm sure everyone was stunned. As I was thinking about this, I felt a warm hand placed on my head. Slowly lifting my face, I followed the edge to see my mother, her expression teetering on the edge of tears, looking at me. Don't cry. You've done well. You haven't been home for 4 years. After this, she shared everything she knew with me. Apparently, she had been worried about me not coming home once since my marriage. She had called my in-laws, asked her friends to visit my in-laws' store to gather information. She had heard about how I was severely worn out, and how the customers secretly talked about how my in-laws were treating me. During her calls, she was told harsh things like, "She's not here right now," or "Your daughter's incompetent." When my mother told my father about how I was being treated, He also seemed to have considered bringing me back home once, but they decided to wait until I asked for help. I had no idea my parents knew everything. I was so embarrassed. I couldn't even look at them. What awful treatment! What's that about? My brother's wife, hearing the story from my mother, was quietly angry. Her face flushed red. I thought you looked worn out. But, so that's what it was about, Jessica. You don't need to go back there. Let's get some alimony and split.
That's right. No more crying.
But just getting the alimony and leaving feels wrong, right? We need to make them understand how much Jessica suffered there. Upon saying this, my sister-in-law showed a defiant smile. When I apologized, saying I didn't need to do anything, and that I was sorry for the situation, my brother told me that I didn't have to apologize, and that he was furious about how I was treated. For some reason, they both left, saying they could handle it. I stood there, dumbfounded by the whirlwind departure of James and his wife. My parents gave me a wry smile and warmly welcomed me to live at home. Several days later, an envelope addressed to me arrived from my in-laws. It contained divorce papers, already signed by my husband. Feeling a sense of sadness, I signed them and submitted them to the city hall the next day. With that, I became officially divorced and single, but an unexpected event occurred the following month. I was looking for a job near my parents' home, but was having difficulty finding one. As I was pondering what to do, my phone rang. The call was from my ex-husband, and when I answered, he seemed very angry.
Hey, what the hell have you done?
This was the first thing my ex-husband Ronald bellowed when I picked up the call. Before I could figure out what he meant, he shouted again.
Since we got divorced, not a single customer has come to my parents' shop. Suppliers are saying they want to end their contracts. It's your fault. My parents are struggling because of you.
I had no clue what he was talking about. I couldn't think of anything I had done to cause this. What are you talking about? I haven't done anything.
Don't lie. Who else could it be but you?
No matter how hard I insisted it wasn't me, he wouldn't listen. He even said, if we couldn't resolve this over the phone, he was going to come over with his parents. I pleaded with him not to come, but he told me to prepare myself and hung up. I rushed to my mother and explained the situation. She seemed calm and started making a call. I was getting frustrated at her nonchalance, not knowing what to do. It was just my mother and me at home. I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to her. I had to protect her. I went to the kitchen to look for something that could be used as a weapon, but my mother stopped me. It's all right, she said, and suggested we calmly wait for Ronald and his parents as she started preparing tea. A few hours later, Ronald and his parents arrived at our house. All three of them were quite angry, glaring at me with intensity.
Don't mess around.
Without a greeting, my ex-husband Ronald tried to lunge at me, but my father-in-law held him back.
I apologize for our sudden visit.
My father-in-law gave a polite nod to my mother. In response, she smiled warmly and invited them into the living room. I was terrified to let those people into our home, but I felt like I had no choice but to trust my mother. She served tea to everyone, and despite their continued glares, she asked my in-laws and Ronald to wait a little longer. A silence fell over the five of us. What felt like hours were probably only a few minutes. Not knowing what my mother was thinking made me anxious. Just then, the sound of the intercom echoed through the house, and before my mother could answer, the front door opened and someone walked in. When I turned to look, the door swung open with force, and there stood my younger brother and his wife, both with stern expressions. Ronald and my in-laws were taken aback by their sudden appearance, completely clueless about what was going to happen. I was just as confused, not knowing what to expect.
Sorry to keep you waiting.
My brother, wearing a suit, took a deep breath and sat next to me, followed by his wife.
What's this? Bringing out your little brother?
Ronald snorted dismissively, shooting a condescending glance at my brother.
My mother informed me of your visit, so I hurriedly prepared for this. You wouldn't believe how long I've been waiting for this moment."
With that, my brother placed an envelope on the table and started pulling out several documents, among which were some photographs. Curious, I peered over and saw the topmost paper labeled Investigation Report.
"Ronald, you've been having an affair, haven't you?"
At my brother's words, Ronald's eyes widened in shock. But my brother didn't stop there. He had apparently gathered evidence of Ronald's infidelity.
"We have all the proof we need. We've also obtained testimony from the woman you cheated with. Therefore, on the grounds of adultery, we will be seeking damages."
At my brother's words, everyone but my mother and my brother's wife, including me, wore surprised expressions.
"What are you talking about? We're already divorced. Aren't you aware? Even after a divorce, if evidence of adultery committed during the marriage is found, damages can be claimed."
With a smirk, my brother left Ronald speechless.
"Enough of this. We're here to discuss what this woman has done. She's disrupting our business. She must have spread false rumors to our clients."
Unable to hold back any longer, my mother-in-law stood up, pointing at me and shouting, with such force that I had to back away. "I will address that matter." My sister-in-law, as if she had been waiting for her turn, started to speak with a smile. "I apologize for the late introduction. My maiden name is Sarah Brown. My father is the owner of Brown's Diner." In fact, although Sarah was not the heir because she married my brother, her father was a top business owner of a well-known restaurant chain in the U.S. recognized by many corporations. In other words, she was a CEO's daughter.
"What did you say?"
The first to react to Sarah's introduction was my father-in-law. Turning towards me, he blanched and shouted,
"Why didn't you tell us?"
"Was there a need to tell you?" Upon hearing my response, my father-in-law seemed to crumble on the spot. However, my mother-in-law was still in the dark, continuing to glare at me.
"What's this Brown business?"
"Oh dear, for a business owner not to recognize the name, that's unfortunate." Sarah cast a pitiful glance at my mother-in-law, who was now turning a darker shade of red.
"What's going on here?"
Asked to explain, I had no choice but to answer. I owe a lot to Sarah's father. He introduced me to suppliers and taught me how to manage the business. Without him, I wouldn't be able to survive in the restaurant industry. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law finally seemed to understand and sat down drained of all of her energy. "I've done some research. It seems that you, Jessica, were the one managing the business all this time. The good reputation with customers, all thanks to you. Even the suppliers were willing to work with us because of you. Without you, they see no reason to continue." Sarah continued to speak, grinning from ear to ear. According to her, just days after I stopped coming in, our regular customers said there was no point in coming if I wasn't there, and they stopped showing up. The same went for the suppliers. They had been willing to work with us because I was there, but they didn't want to deal with my in-laws' restaurant without me, and so they withdrew. Sarah's father found out about all this, and with Sarah's appeal, decided not to help anymore. In other words, my in-laws' restaurant was abandoned by everyone, customer and industry peers alike. "If only you had appreciated Jessica, none of this would have happened." Sarah's face was full of joy as she chuckled to herself. I shuddered at the thought of what happens when you anger Sarah. My in-laws were speechless, but my ex-husband wasn't ready to give up. He continued to shake as he looked over the documents and then threw them on the floor and turned to me.
"This is all your fault,"
he shouted, attempting to strike me, but my brother stepped in.
"Are you still not done?"
To my ex-husband, who had clearly lost his mind, my brother had a stern look on his face as he calmly said,
"I won't forgive you for cheating and treating my sister so poorly."
With that, my ex-husband laughed derisively.
"What can you do? Have you forgotten? I was your brother-in-law, even if only for a short time."
With that, my brother took out a business card he had hidden in his breast pocket and showed it to my ex-husband. The card indicated that my brother was a lawyer. He was affiliated with a well-known law firm, usually dealing with criminal cases, but occasionally he would represent people troubled by issues like infidelity. Seeing the card, my ex-husband realized he had lost and quietly sat down. "I think we're done here. Please leave." My mother spoke to my exhausted in-laws and ex-husband, standing them up and ushering them out of the house. Then she said to me, "Well done." Later, I found out from a friendly local restaurant owner, who had been kind to me during my marriage to my ex-husband, that my in-laws were unable to continue running their restaurant and had to shut down almost immediately. My ex-husband had been exposed for his infidelity at work. His reputation had fallen, and he had been forced to resign in disgrace. They moved away after that, so I don't know the full details, but they said it's likely going to be a tough life from now on. I was able to receive alimony from both my ex-husband and his affair partner, which I gave to James and my parents as a token of my gratitude. At first, they refused, but when I insisted, saying it's all I could offer, they reluctantly accepted. After that, I was able to find a job and have been spending happy times living with my parents. I owe it all to my family. I am truly grateful. I don't know how long it will take, but I plan to return the favor to my parents, James, and his wife in due time.
After returning to my parents' house for childbirth and leaving my home unoccupied, I noticed our savings decreasing through online banking and immediately called my husband, James. "Hey, did you take money out using the debit card I left in the living room?" To my question, James laughed loudly over the phone. Confused and unable to grasp his meaning, James shocked me with his response. "I spent it all for her." "What?" James's laughter only irritated me more. I didn't even want to continue the conversation. However, I opened my mouth to confirm what bothered me the most. "Did you check the name on the debit card?" "Huh?" A few seconds after James's clueless voice, his tone changed drastically to a shriek. I took that as my cue to hang up the phone. Then I called a certain person. "Hello, this is Amelia." Actually, the person on the other end was furious after hearing my story. After the call ended, I gently stroked my belly. I will absolutely protect the child in my belly. My name is Amelia. I'm a 38-year-old housewife. I was an office worker before getting married, but I resigned when I got pregnant. Given my age, I was careful not to overdo it until the birth. James and I got married when I was 36. Being the eldest daughter, I needed my partner to be adopted into my family, which led to breakups whenever I found a potential partner. After repeating the same cycle and nearly giving up on marriage, I met James at a party a friend dragged me to. James was enthusiastic about being adopted from the start, ready to proceed immediately. Though his eagerness was a bit much for me, I was drawn to James, who expressed his feelings for me. Above all, James's appearance was exactly my type. My parents were charmed by James's eloquence, accepted him as their son-in-law, and even built a house near his workplace for us. I felt blessed by everyone's congratulations on this smoothly progressing marriage, despite my initial hesitations. Considering my age, we planned to adopt a child. However, to our joy, I became pregnant 3 months after our marriage, delighting both our parents and in-laws. Yet, James seemed less thrilled than expected, and his attitude towards our marriage gradually changed since then. James's job allowed for flexible hours, and living nearby meant he usually came home for lunch since we got married. But as my morning sickness worsened, James stopped coming home for lunch and even began coming home later at night. "Has work been busy lately? You've been coming home late. Since you're just at home, you have it easy, right? Got a problem with that?" Whenever I asked out of concern, James only responded with harsh words, making conversation impossible. However, he occasionally brought home flowers, matching glasses, or pair watches as gifts. Though I felt somewhat appeased by these gifts, I appreciated his thoughtfulness. I convinced myself that James must be grumpy because of his busy work schedule. But eventually, he started coming home in the middle of the night, and after a month, the gifts ceased. Not only that, but it became common for him to return home in the early morning. Each time James came home, he would immediately take a shower, drink only coffee, and leave for work. At first, he would ask about my prenatal checkups, but even that stopped, and he seemed annoyed whenever I tried to talk to him. This transformation in James was particularly hard on me, already emotionally unstable from the pregnancy. What hurt the most was the smell of James's clothes in the laundry basket. The smell of a woman's perfume whenever I washed his clothes triggered my morning sickness. Initially, I thought he might have visited places with women for work-related entertainments, but then I realized the perfume scent on James's clothes was always the same. Could it be an affair? Voicing my fears suddenly made the reality sink in, and I trembled in terror. Despite being newlyweds and pregnant, the thought of infidelity was unbelievable. I tried desperately to convince myself it might be a misunderstanding. But that didn't alleviate my anxiety. Gradually becoming paranoid, I found myself unexpectedly bursting into tears or zoning out, feeling increasingly cornered. In my second trimester, I found a letter in the post. It was a credit card demand notice from a company I didn't recognize. When I handed the envelope to James, who returned home late at night, he took it reluctantly, checked the contents, and nonchalantly said, Sorry, can you transfer the payment for this? Huh? That's why I'm telling you to pay this off tomorrow. James yelled suddenly, causing me to flinch. Without paying any mind to my reaction, James pushed the credit card bill at me and headed for the shower. I stood there for a moment before coming to my senses and checking the contents of the envelope. $5,000! The amount was so staggering that I couldn't help but exclaim. What on earth was it spent on? Curiosity got the better of me, and I looked at the credit card statement. Listed were names of jewelry and novelty stores, each transaction amounting to $1,000. It could be the money spent on gifts for me. Resignedly, I did as James had said and paid the bill immediately. However, our joint account, being new, didn't have much in it yet. So, I had to pay from my personal account. I really wanted to bill James, but the atmosphere wasn't right to bring it up. And since then, month after month, James kept dumping the credit card payments on me. I meticulously checked and copied each statement. By then, it was clear to me that the money was being spent on another woman, but being pregnant and feeling immobilized, I couldn't bring myself to suggest divorce, holding on to a sliver of hope that he would stop his affairs after the baby was born. However, a shocking truth came to light during a solo shopping trip one day. The day after I saw James's credit card bill. Stopping by a store, I realized it was where James had bought us matching pajamas. I remembered how happy I was when he got them, saying they were big enough to fit even as my belly grew. But my heart sank when I casually checked the price tag on a pair of pajamas. What's going on? The price was a third of what was listed on James's statement. There wasn't even a sale going on. In fact, the tag stated it was a new arrival. Meaning, this was the store's regular pricing. That's when I formulated a terrifying hypothesis. James was having an affair, buying things for his mistress that she liked or wanted, and to avoid suspicion, he'd buy something for me too. A hypothesis so vile that a person with a normal conscience couldn't bear to do it. Thinking back, the gifts never really suited my taste. I assumed they were James's preference, thinking we'd understand each other's tastes over time. Even if the designs were somewhat off for me, I was happy just knowing James had picked them out. But James had betrayed my genuine feelings. That betrayal hurt more than anything, and I was furious. I couldn't let him squander the money I wanted to save for our child. With that thought, I began planning to leave James. During this tumultuous time, Isla, my mother-in-law, visited our home. Isla, being frugal and somewhat absent-minded, was very strict about money. James found her thriftiness suffocating, but I quite liked Isla. The only issue was her doting on James, her son, believing everything he said was right. Is he eating properly? He seems a bit thinner. Yes, he's eating fine, I replied, avoiding mentioning who made the meals or where. The truth was, James hardly ever ate my cooking, maybe twice a week at most. But telling Isla that would make a big deal out of it. So I chose to gloss over it. After hearing my response, Isla left, stuffing the fridge with bags full of food before departing. How much of it would actually end up in James's stomach, I wondered as I put everything away. Then, I noticed a bag under the table. Inside the unfamiliar bag were a debit card and a seal, both belonging to Isla. I hurriedly made a call. Hello, sorry to bother you. You left your debit card and seal here. Oh dear, that's troublesome. Well, it's for a savings account I rarely use, so I'll pick it up next time I visit. Got it. Despite planning to return to my parents' house for the birth of my child soon, I couldn't help but feel uneasy about leaving the debit card at this house. However, since Isla said it was okay, I decided to just store it as instructed. I thought it wouldn't end well if I told James about it, so I kept it to myself and stored it where I usually keep my own debit card. 2 months later, I left for my parents' house with just my debit card. The thought of James now boldly meeting up with his affair partner was enough to bring tears to my eyes, but I had to brace myself for the birth first. During this time, Isla contacted me wanting to check the balance of her savings account. Reluctantly, I got in touch with James to check it for her. Since the last transaction was a bit old and Isla is not tech-savvy, I ended up checking the amount through online banking myself. Isla's savings account already had $200,000 in it. When I told her, Isla just said, "Thanks," and hung up. She's probably going to talk about it with someone in the neighborhood. I didn't think much of it. However, a few days later, my fears came true. It started with a phone call. It looks like the savings account has been canceled. Do you know anything about it? Being away at my parents' house for the birth and having left the house empty, I noticed the savings amount had decreased through online banking and immediately called James. Hey, did you take money out with the debit card from the living room? James laughed loudly on the other end of the phone. Confused and not understanding the meaning, James gave me a shocking reply. I spent it all for her. What? James's laughter was just irritating. I didn't even want to talk anymore. However, I had to ask the most pressing question. Did you check the name on the debit card? Eh? After a few seconds of his dumbfounded voice, a shriek replaced it. I took that as my cue to hang up. Then, I made a call to someone. Hello, this is Amelia. Actually. The person on the other end was furious after hearing my story. After the call, I gently stroked my belly. I will definitely protect this child in my belly. I immediately went to talk to Dad. Despite the heaviness of my full-term belly, I couldn't just sit around. Seeing me enter his office in such a desperate state, Dad was a bit shaken but soon regained his composure. Give it your all, and said, I first made a plan. By now, James must be getting an earful from the person I had just called. Just the thought of it made me unable to stop laughing. A few hours later, James called me. "Why didn't you tell me the debit card was Mom's?" "Well, I didn't think you'd use it. Plus, her name is on the debit card." "You should support me as a wife." "Why should I support your affair?" I could hear James groaning over the phone. Overcoming the sleepiness from battling it all day as a pregnant woman, I firmly presented James with a divorce. "Let's get a divorce."
Huh? Why all of a sudden?
All of a sudden? You buy the same things for your wife and mistress and have me pay for them? The last straw was you trying to withdraw money from my account. Well, that account was your mom's, but I know everything now. Do we need any more reasons for a divorce? Are you going to make our child grow up with just one parent? I felt nauseous at James bringing up the child in my belly now, when he had shown no interest before. My anger exploded. My sleepiness completely disappeared and I cried out loud for the first time in a while.
Better to be a single parent than to have a scumbag like you acting all high and mighty as a dad.
James was silent for a moment at my outburst, then said something, but I ignored it and hung up. Just then, I received a call from Dad saying he had finished arranging for a lawyer. He offered to handle it on my behalf, worrying about my health, but I wanted to see James fall into hell myself, so I refused. Then, I called Isla. Without much of a greeting, she moved on to the topic of savings. I can't believe he would misuse the funds. But, Amelia, you were also at fault. If you needed something, you could have just told me, and I would have considered it.
Huh?
For the sake of the child, you wanted to replace the car, right? It wasn't good for James to choose a luxury car, but Amelia, you also didn't check in advance because you were going back to your parents' house. That's not good either. I was speechless at Isla's words. James had explained to Isla that he had no choice but to use her money because, after telling me it was okay to buy a car, he chose a luxury car and then couldn't afford it at payment time. I could only sigh at James's continuous lies.
That's a lie from James. He didn't buy a luxury car, and I never said it was okay to buy one.
Eh? What do you mean? James has been having an affair and withdrew money from your account for his mistress. He mistook it for my account and told me as if it was only natural. Isla seemed to be at a loss for words. She was deceived and had her money misused. No matter how much she loves her son, there's a limit. But knowing Isla, who dotes on her son, she might believe whatever James tells her again. I played the recording of the phone call with James that I had secretly made earlier. Isla listened in silence until the call with James was finished. Then, after it was over, she let out the longest sigh I've ever heard from her.
Amelia, I'm sorry. It was my fault.
No. How could I do this to Amelia, who is going to give birth to our precious child? Have you already signed with a lawyer? I will help discipline that child. Cutting ties is easy, but I can't let a child who causes trouble for others run wild. I love this aspect of Isla. Normally, she prioritizes her son, but she also cares about social standing, so she has always been strict with James about rules and regulations. Knowing Isla was essentially lenient with him, James often tried to lie to get out of trouble, especially when he did something wrong. I overlooked small lies, and even though Isla might have made snide remarks to me, she never did anything unreasonable. That's why I tried not to mind. However, this might have led to the current situation. Thinking this, I decided to make sure to drop him into hell this time. A few days later, a meeting was held at my parents' house with Isla included. I had the person I invited earlier wait in the guest room and then invited James and Isla in. When we guided them to the guest room, the face of James, who had been sulking, changed to one of astonishment.
Why is Madison here?
I invited her. She was necessary for our discussion today. Isla seemed not to understand who the person in front of her was at first, but upon my explanation, realized this was the mistress who had used her savings, and her expression filled with anger.
You! How dare you misuse my savings? No, James said it was okay to use it. We went to luxury hotels and enjoyed spas and stuff. Why am I being scolded now?
Madison showed no signs of remorse, sitting in her chair with arrogance. I wondered how long her composure would last, smiling inwardly as I seated Isla and James and took my place. Isla was the first to speak. I'm very sorry for what has happened. We would like to proceed as Amelia wishes, so please let us know your preferences.
Huh? Why do I have to do what she says? Amelia's the one who got pregnant and frustrated me. I'm the one who should be getting compensation. Be quiet. What? It's the truth, isn't it?
James continued to complain even as Isla scolded him, looking no more than a child throwing a tantrum, causing me to sigh. James glared at me, apparently annoyed by my reaction. In the midst of this atmosphere, it was Madison, the mistress, who spoke carelessly.
Can I go home? I don't understand why I was suddenly called here.
No, you're involved, aren't you? This isn't a place for you to relax, so please listen carefully.
I'm busy, though,
Madison said, playing with her hair. I tried to maintain a smile despite my irritation. James and Madison, we will be seeking compensation from you. $50,000 from James and $30,000 from Madison.
$50,000? That's too much.
If you have a complaint, we can take it to court. At the mention of court, James's face slackened. Madison remained unfazed. I was curious about her demeanor, but its meaning would soon become clear.
Then, James, good luck paying $80,000. And since I'm pregnant, you'll be taking care of the birth expenses and everything else. What? Pregnant? I wasn't informed.
Because I didn't say. Madison's revelation seemed to have caught James off guard. Having somewhat anticipated this from my prior research, I wasn't too surprised. Thinking about the even bigger shock to come, I was, in fact, inwardly smirking. Well, it doesn't matter who pays. I'll be expecting $80,000 from both of you.
There's no way we can pay that amount. Don't get ahead of yourself.
As James stood up in protest, a satisfying sound echoed. The source of the sound was James's cheek, now reddening. Beside him, Isla was breathing heavily, making it clear she had slapped James.
Enough is enough. Mom.
Amelia, I'll pay the full amount. Of course, I'll make sure James repays me. I'll also have him pay child support. James was left wide-eyed and frozen at Isla's words. I thanked Isla and delivered the final blow to James. Well, it might be tough, but good luck. Paying back mom and child support, and then your new life with Madison. Raising a child whose father could be anyone, James, you do have your kind moments, don't you?
Whose child could be anyone? Didn't you know? Madison, it seems there are a few others. What? What do you mean?
James, now standing, raised his voice towards Madison. Madison, thinking she hadn't been caught, looked up at James with a pale face.
It's a lie. It's only James for me.
And who might these people be? I presented Madison with photos that served as evidence, showing her entering lodging facilities with multiple men.
You've been deceiving me?
It's not like that. Really. I only love you.
How can I believe that?
Madison, in tears, pleaded her case in front of an indignant James, but the evidence made her words seem like lies. However, whether James and Madison stayed together or separated was of no interest or concern to me.
Well, that's none of my business, so could you please leave the house? Hey, Amelia, wait. Maybe we should reconsider the divorce.
The divorce is final. James, looking utterly despondent, was led away by Isla. Madison staggered out behind them. I watched them leave, feeling a sense of liberation. After the divorce, James and Madison didn't end up marrying. The child in Madison's belly was confirmed to be James's through a DNA test, but Madison lost interest in James once his money ran out and decisively left him. Yet, she still demands child support, and James, burdened with repayments to Isla and child support to both me and Madison, has most of his salary drained every month. He's recently started working in road construction to make ends meet. As for Madison, after cutting ties with James,
the child is yours.
She was extracting child support from multiple men by claiming the child was theirs. However, once it was revealed the child was James's, the men demanded their money back and cut off their support. Now, she lives in an old apartment with her child, juggling part-time jobs to get by. As a fellow mother, I'm concerned for the child. But since it's a consequence of her choices, I don't feel inclined to help. I just hope she stays out of my life from now on. As for me, after that meeting, I gave birth safely. A healthy boy was born. Despite it being my first childbirth, it was a quick delivery that even surprised the attending doctor. Though painful, meeting my child, whom I had carefully nurtured for 10 months, was incredibly joyful, and I vowed to make him happy with all my might.